You are now listening to Effin B Radio.
And welcome to Effin B Radio. My name is Lindsay Collins and I'm your host. God, it feels good to be back. I had to take just really 1 week, but an episode off. And that I was supposed to do one. Anyway, you guys know the deal. SKEWERZ was happening. I was so busy getting ready for the party that I could not fathom sitting down and recording an episode. We were just too much in the weeds. And with good reason. I think all in all, about 200 people ended up coming to my house. I thought the floor might cave in over the course of 3 hours. So many people came out. If you're listening to this show and you came to the art show at our house on Saturday night, this is a personal thank you to you. Because if I can just say that, and I promise not to no, I don't. I very well may go on about this art show for the entire episode because it was that impactful for me. But anyway, the point is, if you were a guest at SKEWERZ, you deserve my gratitude and Jeremy's gratitude and Robert Pratt's gratitude because, and really every artist who was a part of the show, because you guys were great guests. Sometimes I go to parties and it feels like people stay with the people they came with and they kind of hide in their corners where they feel safe and they make their way around the party and it's kind of like they can't wait to leave. And I don't want to speak for all of you. Maybe some of you came and had a bad time, but if you did, I couldn't tell because it seemed like, and this is a wild visual to imagine, but in my head, the way the energy in the party, it felt like we were all holding hands in a giant circle. Like we were the Who's down in Whoville, just being together, mixing it up with each other, actually looking at the art and being like so obsessed with all of the work that these amazing artists put into the show. And again, if you're not aware of what SKEWERZ is, or you're like just tuning in and you're like, what is she talking about? SKEWERZ was an art show that we held at mine and Jeremy's house, and it featured the artwork of Isabel Bornstein, Cristina, Jeremy Croft, oh my God, Chloe Hogan, Nathan McClements, Sean Money and Elizabeth Faye, Katy Mixon. Like the list was just absolutely unreal. Isabel Bornstein. And then right at the end, Laura Lee Robinson, who is kind of a big deal, graciously agreed to put her work into the show. And it was absolutely unreal for me to see this show come together. Christina's work blows me away. I think he's a genius. I think he's an absolute fucking genius. Like he truly, I don't know. He ended up spending the whole weekend with me and Jeremy and Robert. My parents graciously, and my sister graciously kept our kids for 2 days and 3 nights, 2 nights and 3 days, whatever it is. It was a long time. And we were able to just focus on putting on this art show. Robert and I made snacks. And when I say Robert and I mean, it's mostly Robert. He walked in straight off the plane and pretty much went to work. And he didn't stop working until, I don't know, Sunday morning. I think Jeremy eventually took over and made pancakes Sunday morning. But Robert, also, if you're just tuning in or if your head is under a rock, Robert is, I think we decided we've been friends for 13 years. And he and I met, I trained him on his first day at Per Se. And he went on to have and is still having an insane career in restaurants, places like the French Laundry, King, Noma. I mean, you name it. He's been on this podcast many, many times. He's a very dear friend of mine. So if you're just tuning in or not aware, he's also on Instagram at Shay Robert, and that's CHEZ ROBERT. There it is. He makes amazing recipes, shares them generously, and he has a newsletter. So if you were at SKEWERZ and you were like, who was that magical man that just kept floating around with trays of piping hot chickpea panisse and perfectly crisped sage, where it's the kind of dark forest green, but it's not burnt. You know how hard that is to achieve? You know how hard that is to achieve in a sweat box that was my house with 200 people inside and outside at any given time? It was an absolute... Sometimes you throw a party, and I'm talking about me here, but sometimes I throw a party, and I don't often reference meme culture because I think memes are actually... they're actually the kryptonite to real jokes and people that write real jokes. But every now and then a meme has its place. And there's one meme out there, and you guys all know what I'm talking about. And it's the one where it's Taylor Swift and Dog the Bounty Hunter. And in my head, when I throw a party, in my head, the party is Taylor Swift. And I have all of these expectations for who's going to come and how that's going to feel and how the party's going to flow and how everyone's going to want to talk to each other and how the music will be just right. And how the vibe will just kind of meander and feel like you've discovered something by the time you leave the party. And in reality, that's the Taylor Swift version. And then in reality, it's kind of like, I don't know, I black out and then I'm like, what happened? And why is the house so messy? And you're not really sure if your vision landed. And you feel like you got close to pulling off how you felt like it would be in your head. But it's about 30%, if we're honest. It's like 30% of what you imagine because your expectations are so, your imagination is endless. And for this party in particular, and I can say this with all honesty, it was like Taylor Swift, and then it was Taylor Swift, if you're following the reference. Like exactly how I hoped and wished the party and the art show would go, that's how it went. And that is like not lost on me that's rare. And just the people that were involved in the show brought their best work and really like kind of worked together to make this beautiful show that was so fun and so special to me. And every single guest that was here did their part and upheld the like responsibility of a good guest, which doesn't always happen. There's always like somebody who's acting insane or like causes a fight or is an asshole or talks too loud or hurts someone's feelings or like is rude or something. And there was just not a single one of those at this party. So again, if you were a guest, I thank you because not only did you show up, like showing up is kind of like the bare minimum when you're a guest at a party, when you're invited, but showing up and like showing out in the good way is what all of you did. And I just couldn't have been more pleasantly surprised by how much fun I had, especially because I felt like, it's your house and it's scary to just give people your address and not know how many people are coming. If you've been listening to this show for a few weeks, you know that I was really stressed out about not knowing the amount of people and how it will go. And like, you start to get self-conscious about how your backyard looks like an abandoned daycare and shit like that. And then everyone shows up and suddenly it was just like the whole room was covered in this rosy glow. Like I just looked around and it was like this kind of pink champagne color was just cascading throughout the whole entire room. I know I sound insane, but this is just how it felt from my perspective. And every person that came up and gave me a hug or was like, holy shit, this thing is so delicious, or this bite was really special, or that focaccia sandwich. And oh my God, you thought of a vegan option. And that was actually, the menu itself was something that I, again, give Robert so much credit for because he's just such a smart person and he went to the CIA and he's very practiced and organized and thoughtful and just absolutely unwavering in his focus. Whereas I'm like sort of like just a mess, like a blender that someone left the top off of, like a Vitamix with no top. And it's just like accidentally turned it on high. That's how I am in the kitchen. And Robert really saved me from myself because he kept everything just running smoothly so that I could just walk around and stare at every beautiful person and try to make sure they got something to eat and drink and that I got to say hi to them. And it was really wild, the party itself. And then even leading up to the party, I was telling Jeremy this morning, I have this really like bluesy, not like rhythm and blues. I'm talking about down and depressed feeling of like a post-Christmas day if you participate. I don't know. Maybe there's post Hanukkah. Maybe there's like the day after your birthday or the day after your wedding. I don't know. I never got married. There's these certain things that I've never done, so I don't know. But I feel like after a major event that you put a lot of work into and have really been looking forward to and have built it up in your head, after that event, you feel kind of like just adrift. Like, what's next? Like, I don't know what to do now, because that was so fun that it's almost like you feel for a second like that you could do that forever. That could be, for in my case anyway, I was like, I really feel like I hit on something that I'm like, maybe you guys know I'm always on here having existential crises, trying to figure out what I'm going to do with my life and what I'm meant to do. But maybe it's something akin to that party, because I'm like combining creative endeavors, bringing artists together who are the people I like to hang out with the most. And then like binding that with hospitality and an invitation to like come in and discover something or talk to someone that maybe you haven't talked to before, or see a piece of art that makes you think differently or makes you feel something that maybe you can't even put your finger on. It's really a special thing. And I'm like, maybe that's what I want to do with my life. And it also, it made me realize, and this is advice to anyone listening, that this idea to have the party was born out of just one little thought that was like, oh, we should do this. And I think most people kind of shoo those ideas away. And I know I have for a long time. If you've been really, really paying, if you're a long listener, you know, we were planning this party back in October of last year. And some things came up in my personal life. My mom got diagnosed with cancer, and it was just a chaotic and really difficult time. And we had to kind of put it on pause. And I didn't know if the idea would ever be resurrected again, because it just felt like the fact that we had announced it and then had to cancel it was like this weird blockade for me emotionally, where I was like, I don't know. I don't want to go through that again, like announcing it and then worrying that something else might come up and then we'd have to cancel and look like insane people, and or that it wouldn't go well, or that no one would come, or all these fears that kind of come in, or like, who are you to put on a show at your house? Like, what do you fucking think you're doing? Like those kind of vibes, or like what people might say about it when you're not around, the fact that you want to do something like that. But all I want to say is, I don't care how big or grand the idea or how small and seemingly insignificant. If something comes to your mind, you have to act on it. You have to. You have to just do it. Even if it's a flash, like things that seemingly don't matter. Something as simple as like something that you wanted to say, but you were like, I don't know. You thought better of it and like gave yourself too much time to think about it, or talk yourself out of the idea, or poke holes in the idea and think about all the reasons that it's not a good idea. And I'm talking about everything from what to eat for dinner to being brave enough to try something new, or picking up a new skill, or putting yourself out there in a way, or even something as small as like, I feel like I want to make this thing. Maybe that's a piece of art. Maybe that's a new dish. Maybe that's a love letter to someone. And you're like, oh, I don't know if I should. The reality is you should, because those ideas are not there for no reason. Those ideas get put into your brain, and those opportunities, you make them yourself. No one's going to come and be like, you know what would be a good time to tell this person that you're in love with them? It's now. No one's going to do that but you. No one's going to say, hey, we could plan this 6 months from now and really do it right. Or we could say, how about now? How about right now, while the idea is like searingly hot and fresh in my brain, and the impulse is there and it feels right. And don't give yourself the time. Like, shorten that space where you have time to pick the idea apart and figure out why it's not going to work, or why it's not a good idea. I'm not saying they'll all work. Maybe you tell someone you're in love with them and they're like, I actually don't love you. And that sucks. That sucks a lot, actually. Why did I use that example? Now it's like, now people are afraid. No, but I'm just saying, like, you'll learn something either way. I'm not saying like I and myself and Jeremy and Robert and everyone who participated in the show, like, like we're some kind of phenoms. I just mean that the idea was such a blink, and it was like, we should just do a show here. And instead of being like, yeah, that would be fun, and then moving on to the next topic, I sat on with Isabel, my very, 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 very sweet friend, my girlie. Shout out to you if you're listening. And she was like, why don't we do it in July? And I was like, in my head, I was like, oh, well, because that's in a month and that's not enough time to blah, blah. And I initially said no and was like, let's plan it for October. And that'll give us time. And I was just like, I made all these excuses. Everybody's out of town in July or whatever it is. And then I ended up calling her back the next day and I was like, no, you know what? Let's go. Let's do it. And then the way that I feel now after having pulled it together and pulled it off and had so many people who were so excited to be there and buy art and try food and just be open to the experience and come all the way to North Charleston off Dorchester Road. That would have never happened if I had just been, done what I initially wanted to do, which was find a reason not to do it or 10 reasons not to do it. So I just want to encourage you, if you're listening, and maybe you're on the brink of quitting your job and trying to do a pop-up, or maybe you want to branch out and get into food writing, or maybe you want to change careers altogether. Maybe you're working in a medium and you feel stuck. Like whatever it is, listen to yourself and do it, because on the other side of that is this really amazing feeling that I have right now from having spent the weekend putting all of my efforts into throwing something that I kind of thought up in my head and then brought on the people who could make that happen, like Robert and Isabel and Nathan and Katy, and Sean and Elizabeth and Chloe and Jeremy. Obviously he's been in it from the beginning. Robert, I'm just like saying people's names over and over again now, but it really is like that. Laura Lee, like I just feel so honored to have had that experience with them, because in this life, without being like too fucking so over the top, obviously I'm in a really just dreamy headspace, but that's an experience that will never happen again. Not exactly like that. Not all of those people, not those same exact people will come to that same exact location on a really hot summer night and have that same party. That will never exist again. Paul Cristina will never be at my house for 4 days with Robert Pratt and Jeremy. And it was just the four of us. And we spent I think a total of 72 hours, just the four of us. And when it was over, I had that, I just left all my best friends at camp feeling, even though I never went to camp or enjoyed it. But I know I understand the sentiment. And the sentiment is, I'm going to still write to you and we'll all be best friends. But the reality is unless you make those things happen, no, you won't. You got to write that letter. You got to bring them all together, because we were just kind of like waking up every single day. And as an adult, you don't get to do any fun. I don't get to do any fun stuff like that. I've been a mom for so long that I'm like, I wake up and I work my job and I record Effin B Radio and I, make food content and I take care of my kids and I do all the day in and day out of the things that keep our lives moving forward. But you rarely get to kind of hunker down with three other creatives and just talk. Like the conversations we had across the whole 72 hours that we were just all in this house, hanging the art, getting the lights just right, prepping the food, watering the plants, staging the plant, getting every little detail kind of how we wanted it to be, and all weighing in on it and taking it seriously. That's another thing that adults never do unless it's a job that they're being paid for. Is it just felt very pure and very sweet and very childlike. It felt like true play, where it's no, this is something that we're taking very seriously, but we're not taking ourselves seriously. And we're just working together and lending our individual gifts to make this thing the best that we can. And again, I don't want to put words in anyone's mouth, but the feedback that I did get from people, which was so generous and so kind. And if you sent a note or wrote a message and said what a great time, or just told me in person, I keep running into people who are just like, I was at the show and it was so amazing. And it was just a really extraordinary time, or just had a great time, and or brought a bottle of wine or a treat. Like, I don't know that I'm still processing the whole thing, but I know that I want to do it again. And I know that I want to keep doing things like that, because there's just very few times in my life where everything felt that good. I've had individual times where I'm like, I'm really proud of the food I'm serving. I'm really proud of the place I work, or I'm really proud of this thing I made, or I'm really proud of what the work I put into something. Like I felt that in individual ways, but never in all aspects of my life at one time. And I think that's a rare thing. And I think when that happens, you have to really pay attention to it, and then try to do more of that in your life. So that is my very, 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 rosy glasses, poetic take on how the party felt for me personally. And just a genuine gratitude that I want to extend to, like I said, every single person that came. Wow. Every single person that came, wherever they came from. Thank you. And let's do another one. Like, shouldn't we? It was just so fun. I mean, like, even writing the menu, I had these ideas for like what people want to eat for snacks. And then at the end, I just kept in my head being like, simplify. And I was like, this is summer. It's the dead of summer. Like, let's just focus on beautiful vegetable driven dishes. And then, and just by like happenstance, like we put thought into everything, but it was also like most of the stuff was just vegan accidentally. Like the chickpea panisse is vegan. And so it's like that covers so many bases. The focaccia that Robert made was extraordinary, like something so special that I don't even know when I've ever had anything that special in terms of bread. And Tara Darling and Jon, they brought, okay, here's the real story. Tara and Jon brought a speed rack that single-handedly saved the entire party. And from now on, in my home kitchen, I will never not have a speed rack. And if you're a person that doesn't work in restaurants and don't know what a speed rack is, it's basically a vertical shelf with about 20 tiers where you can slide a full sheet tray. And it's like a filing cabinet for sheet trays. If you're following, it's like a metal rack. It looks like an oven, like how you would have multiple different places to put a rack in your oven, except it holds sheet trays, and it keeps the footprint very, very small, but it keeps the storage exponential. Like you would need such counter space or storage to store 20 sheet trays of prepared food ready to go. But Tara, just like without even me thinking of it, I would have never thought to ask her, could I borrow, or anyone? I would have never thought that I needed one until now. And now I realize I've really been living my life wrong. I've really been, and I think everyone needs a speed rack. But anyway, or at least people who are serious about cooking at home and are constantly frustrated with how little counter space they have, no matter how much counter space there is. There's just never enough. And she brought that and on a trailer with coolers so that we would have ice. And she brought the most beautiful, beautiful haul of tomatoes that I've ever seen. And I don't think the party would have happened without her. So if you're listening, Tara, thank you. Jon, thank you for not only just putting in the work to grow those insanely beautiful vegetables that made all the difference, but to be able to offer that without asking. It was like so forward thinking. And it's such a sign of a pro. You know, it's like someone who's like, oh, you know what you're going to need is this. So now I'm going to buy a speed rack because Tara did come and pick hers up. I had to give hers back. But yeah, just so many learnings. I learned so much from throwing this party, and most of all, I learned that I'm lucky. I'm lucky as fuck to know the people that I know, and to be surrounded by a community that really does want to do cool things and be a part of experiences that I get excited about. And I know that that's kind of rare. And so I feel unbelievably lucky. This is just my thank you speech to everyone and everything that happened this weekend, because I'm just still actively trying to process it, and probably will be for a long, long time. But yeah, if you missed SKEWERZ, you really fucking missed it. That's all I gotta say, is you missed something pretty special. And if you didn't miss it, then I thank you, because I know how hard it is to get out of your house, especially when you're like, it's 103 degrees, literally. And it's way easier to go see the Barbie movie, which I still think is amazing and you should do. But the people that made it a priority to come and see the work that these artists, I'm just so proud of the art community in Charleston as well, because I'm like, not only were there amazing artists hanging work in the show, but it was so cool to put faces to names for some of the people that I hadn't even actually met, but I've been a fan of their work for a long time. And there was just so many of those in attendance and at the party. And it just reminds you that if you want more out of something, that the best way to do that is by creating connection with other people who also want the same things. And that's, I really will leave it at that. I'm like, sorry, I'm just going on. It's hard for me to stop because, and this is like the recap of I've been sorting through these details in my brain and trying to like consolidate them so I didn't just ramble incessantly, but it's just hard. It's hard to put it into words. It's kind of like one of those things that if you weren't there, it's hard to describe, but if you were, you know what I'm talking about. And I'm just so grateful to all of you. But now it's kind of back to business, you know? It's back to business. I've been like trying to just figure out, I feel like I'm floating in space, kind of like, what do I do now? What are my jobs? What was I supposed to be doing? Like, it's hard to come back to reality. And it makes me just want to do things like that for eternity. But yeah, I'm sure I'll be saying thank you to people for the end, till the end of time, because there's just too many people to thank. And I think of them every single day. I'll be like, oh my God, this person did this. My mom made 5-gallon bags of homemade Chex Mix, and it was a hit. Camille passed hors d'oeuvres, like for no reason. She didn't even have to. She was just a guest at the party, and she was like, oh, let me help you. Like everyone just, oh man. It's great. Mari brought me a sub from Harris Teeter so that I wouldn't be hungry at the end of the night. And just everything. Jeremy made pancakes the next day when all the artists kind of came in, filed in separately and picked up the work that hadn't sold or that they were taking back. And we all ate pancakes and just like sat around and we're like, wasn't that fucking crazy? It was beautiful. The whole experience was beautiful. And I enjoyed every second of it. And I want to do another one. If you want to see another SKEWERZ, maybe, I don't even know. I'm like, will it be called SKEWERZ again? Will it have a different name? But if you'd like to come to another art party at my house, let me know. DM me. Or if you were there and you're like, hey, actually, I had a shitty time, let me know. Burst my bubble, because right now I'm on another planet and I just simply won't hear of anything other than rave reviews. No, I'm just kidding. I would be happy to hear if someone had a bad time, but I'd be willing to bet they didn't. I'd be willing to bet everyone had a great time. At least I hope they did. And if they didn't, just don't tell me. Just keep it a secret forever. But yeah, that's where we're at, people. I'm I'm just one little lady without a purpose now. I gotta find my next fix. What event am I gonna throw next? As if I threw it on my own. What are we gonna throw next? Let's do it. And if you're somebody who's got an idea or is like, I got something I want to do. I just can't encourage you enough to just fucking do it. Don't pick it apart. The most beautiful things happen when you just really listen to your instinct, that little tiny voice that's like, hey, you should do this really stupid sounding thing. It's probably not stupid. It's probably exactly what you're supposed to be doing. And I'll see you next week. Bye. Oh, you can rate and review the show. You can. It really helps the show. If you go to iTunes and you just click the button down at the bottom where the stars are that says rate and review. Even if you just want to give it a rating, that's like the easiest thing. You can just click 5 stars and that's cool. Or you can take the time to write a little note and that's even cooler. And I'll see you next week. I love you. Bye.
Je laisserai un mot sur le frigo. On déciderait de se faire la malle. Ta famille, les amis, le bureau.